Hello, BookTube. I thought I'd check in with a bit of mail today. Beautiful, beautiful sunny day. It was actually kind of chilly in the early morning at 7 or 6, which is refreshing. We have a few periodicals and a few packages, including a box. And two of the periodicals are old friends of mine. They're old favorites. One is the Martha's Vineyard Gazette, a big broadsheet newspaper off the coast of Martha's Vineyard that has great high-resolution photos. And is that a dog being adopted on the cover? No, no, that's the prize winner of a derby. Okay. I am the book reviewer for the Martha's Vineyard Gazette. I don't have. It's the off season, so I haven't had many book reviews lately. And there's not one in here. But it's still an enormous amount of fun to read, especially the back section, the 3 columns in the back. What I wouldn't give for there to be a 4th column on the Vineyard in Books that I write. That would be great. And then also another familiar thing here is the Bedford Times Press from Bedford, Iowa, which is a local newspaper, very local. The headline here on this issue is Bedford City Council's hires a utility billing clerk. It doesn't get more local than that. But inside every issue of the Bedford Times Press, in case you feel like subscribing, inside every issue is a book column about bookish things by yours truly. They give me a nice amount of space, pretty much half a page, minus ads, every week. What was on my mind recently here? A friend of mine recently asked me a very familiar batch of urgent, almost wailing questions. What do I do with all these books? What's the point of having shelves and shelves and piles of books, sometimes that I can't even reach? How did I reach the point where I'm navigating around stacks of books on the floor of almost every room? Where does it all end? And I meditate on that for the course of a fun column. I very much enjoy having a column again. This runs in a few places and could stand to run in a few more. If you have a local newspaper or a library bulletin or whatever that you want it to run in, feel free to let me know. But there was a third periodical that I've never had before. I won't say that it's unfamiliar to me because I do remember it, I think. I have no idea why it came to the house. I have never subscribed to it. It's the Epoch Times. It's got 2 sections. The front is allegedly news, and then the back is opinion. A lot of writing, and the minute I have no idea why it came here, but the minute I saw it, I thought, well, don't I remember this? Don't I remember the Epoch Times having a bunch of regular, obnoxiously repetitive YouTube commercials starring a good-looking young guy with big horn-rimmed glasses and an obvious tobacco addiction, and also a very improperly concealed Czechnian accent. Don't I remember that? This is obvious propaganda. This is designed to gin up anger and hatred, and also to spread misinformation. I have no idea why I got it. Just look at one headline. We'll show you that. You don't even have to get into the opinion section. One headline here. I mean, there's a story on the front here. U.S. inflation remains persistently high at 8.2%, fueled by high rent and food prices. But I read the article, and it doesn't mention that inflation is a worldwide phenomenon and that it's hitting its numbers now largely because then U.S. President Donald Trump started a tariff war with China. There's no mention of that at all. It's laid squarely at the feet of Joe Biden. But the main article, there's also pure scaremongering. This one here is ESG emerging as the next CRT in electoral politics, and this is written by someone called Emil Akan, Emelakan. That's not a fake name. I'm the czar of all the Russias. But the header is Environmental, Social, and Corporate Governance. That's ESG, Environmental, Social, and Corporate Governance. Has been one of the most popular investment trends in recent years. While it encourages businesses to be more environmentally and socially responsible, it's frequently criticized for advancing a, quote, woke agenda. But the main story, the one in the middle underneath the big photo, is grassroots election integrity efforts go full scale. The whole country has seen the shape, the face of the kind of grassroots election integrity efforts that are being talked about here. They're not being mentioned in this article, but we've all seen pictures of masked, hired goons sitting ominously, staring at people as they go in and out of voting districts in key swing states. Armed, sitting there with their AK-47s on their laps, taking photographs of people's license plates. Despite a recent ruling, clear voter intimidation is clearly meant to say you are being watched, and if you look brown or don't look like you vote for our guy, we know where you live, or we will. We might follow you to where you live. That's what the whole country knows of as election integrity efforts. But look at the subhead. The subheading shows you that you are dealing here in a fictional reality. Thousands of poll watchers and election workers trained in multiple states after 2020 election. Well, we know that it's after the 2020 election because it's the year 2022. Why is that mentioned? It is mentioned so that this article can take place in an alternate reality in which it is just commonly known that the election in 2020 had massive, rampant, gigantic, outcome-influencing election fraud. That's the only reason that headline makes sense, is to say, after we all know what happened in the 2020 election, that's why this is happening. When there was no wide-scale election fraud in the 2020 election, there's not a single scrap of evidence, and every single responsible person, including the former president's former attorney general, have said under oath there was no fraud. That is the fact. The fact is there was no fraud. This only makes sense if this whole publication is taking place in an alternate reality in which it's somehow woke to want to know whether or not your corporation is flying people around willy-nilly on private jets, boiling our atmosphere. In which a subtitle of a headline, the front page headline, can say, well, after the 2020 election, that's why these efforts are ramping up. Nodding at the fact that all of this paper's readers will be living in that alternate reality in which, well, after the 2020 election was stolen, we have to figure out something to do. So I'm hoping that the Epoch Times doesn't send me any more issues. I'm well familiar with that alternate reality. 170 million Americans live in that alternate reality every day. They live in that alternate reality. So if they walk outside and they realize that the garbage collection truck backed up on their curb and cracked part of the curbstone so it doesn't look good, they immediately think that is Joe Biden's fault. And they're not being hyperbolic. They're not making a joke for Facebook. They believe it. They live 24 hours a day in an alternate reality. The only time that they examine the outside reality, even a little, is to notice with increasing anger, and anger that increases every day, that the outside reality does not match the alternate reality in which they live. The alternate reality in which they live is one in which there are no any more free elections, in which women are officially, legally second-class citizens, and in which a Trump runs the country as a boss. We can't trust the elections, so we don't have them anymore. He'd win anyway. And since he didn't get one, he didn't get his second term, he's owed who knows how many terms. They live in that reality in which there may be a president in the Oval Office, but he's the leader of the country. And the only time they ever notice that there's a discord between the outward reality and the reality in which they spend every day, in which they go to church every Sunday, is when they realize they have to curb their tongue when they're in a promotion meeting at a job. They have to stop talking about it then because there's a disconnect between all those other people and me, and I know it. And believe you me, they not just know it in those circumstances, they resent it. They very much resent it. This is the world in which they want to live, in which this is the New York Times, in which this is considered reporting. And the only point that I've made about it over quite some time on this channel is that isn't tenable. That situation isn't tenable. Every single one of those 170 million people has been brainwashed. They have been, the common term now is gaslit. They have gone down a rabbit hole, whatever 21st century term you want to use is. They have been programmed to believe an alternate reality exists and to shore it up in all the ways that belief systems have been shored up for 17,000 years. And the key about that kind of programming, it is possible to extricate someone from that, but it requires a process known as deprogramming. And deprogramming is a long, labor-intensive, very individual process. It's not possible, it's very much possible to program people en masse. It is not possible to deprogram people en masse. That does not happen. Because the architecture, the imbrication of cult indoctrination is self-sustaining. So you have to get them out of that. They can't stay. If they stay in that cult, it will sustain itself. It's even self-sustaining within the individual. Everything, they have been trained, coded, programmed, so that everything they see is meant to reinforce the reality of their alternate reality. So you have to, in order to, anyone is, if you've had the misfortune to deal with deprogramming a family member from a cult of any kind, then you know what I'm talking about. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of individual effort. There literally aren't enough people in the country to deprogram the people who are already programmed in the country, which means that that's not tenable. It's not fixable. It's not this delusion that people have on social media that if some news story is just bad enough, all of the programmed people, all the Trump cult members will wake up. It isn't going to happen. That's not how cults happen. You have to extricate the person and then deprogram them lovingly, a long period of time. But anyway, that was the mail. I blame the rant on Epoch Times. I don't know why I got this. I would have been happy instead to go without a rant on a beautiful Saturday morning. But we'll skip the rant now and move on to the mail before I lose steam completely here. So we'll do 3 packages, and then we'll be done. Just 3 packages here. What is this first one? Oh, that is an invoice. I don't want that. Oh, fantastic. Oh, great. All right. Well, this is a cure for a rant. Certainly. This comes out in mid-November. This is just about as pure a Steve Bullseye as you can get. Just about as pure. This is John Carey. This is his book, Sunday Best. 80 Great Books from a Lifetime of Reviews. This is a collection of book reviews by a really good book reviewer. I only have one John Carey book. I'm so happy to have this. How wonderful. This is from the good folks at Yale. In 1977, newly installed as a professor of English at Oxford, John Carey took the position of chief reviewer for the Sunday Times, a job he still retains. In a career of spanning more than 40 years and upwards of 1,000 reviews, Carey has kept abreast of the brightest and best books of the day, distilling his thoughts each week for the entertainment of Sunday readers. Contained in this volume is the cream of that substantial crop, and that's pretty much what you need. You pretty much need to be with the Sunday Times for a quarter of a century, half a century, for a publisher to really go for a collected book reviews volume. They're not really generally interested in such things. Covering subjects as diverse as the science of laughter, the art of Grace and Perry, the history of madness, and Sylvia Plath's letters, and incorporating earlier writings down with dawns and vegetable gardening, this is a collection of treats and surprises, suffused with careful thought, wisdom, and enjoyment. Okay, well, I have a whole bookcase of exactly this. I will read this. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff in there that I've never read. I'll read this. I will write about it, happily write about it, and then it will go on the shelf next to the one other John Carey book that I have. Great. Wow, the mail started off with a collection of book reviews. How wonderful. That might seem very boring to a lot of the rest of you, probably justifiably so, but it's It's mother's milk to me. So, what is this next one? Also a finished copy. Oh, okay. This is something we've seen on this channel before. This must be a November release. Yes, it must be a November release. Yes, this comes out in the end of November. This is the finished copy of Aesthetica by Ali Rowbottom. I think we saw this a month ago. This novel represents a fictional exploration of my own girlhood and transition into adulthood. Naturally, it does. Of course, what other story is worth telling? What other story has ever been better than your own story on your social media? Honestly, I mean, what if you're a writer, a novel? There's nothing fictional in this, but if you're a writer, what other subject could you pick? The Roman Empire at its height, struggle of religious zealots during the Protestant Reformation, struggle of women to vote, a made-up story about a family afflicted with domestic violence or having a cult member in their midst. Those things are trivial compared to what you think from day to day. I was 17 when I moved to New York City and fell hard into the nightlife scene. It was the early 2000s, the age of meatpacking district mega clubs, models, and bottles, Jeffrey Epstein over one table over, and Paris Hilton dancing on the bar. It was also the first personal experience I had with American image culture, youth, and beauty as currency. Per the mandates of the 1990s era third-wave feminism I was born into, I saw self-objectification as my right. It was downright wasteful to eschew the sexual liberty my foremothers had fought for, I believed. And yet, often my experience as a young woman capitalizing on her youth and beauty ended in pain, regret, and more than once danger. A decade later, following my mother's death, I found myself increasingly vulnerable to the beauty standards and photoshopped images perpetuated by Instagram influencers. I was newly married, a newly frocked PhD, a newly published author. I should have known better than to buy into the impossible ideals influencers and models sold. And yet following them made me feel connected to the wider world, a world of... Okay, so this is straight up autobiography. It comes out in November, and it is a memoir. If you know, don't be fooled by, in the 21st century, don't be fooled by something calling itself a novel. This is a fad that is afflicting the entire world of fiction, of currently published fiction. And the fad is to explicitly lie on the cover. There is nothing fictional in this book. Nothing that can't be documented by third-party sources without any cooperation from Ali Rowbottom. So this is not in any way a novel. And if you say, oh, let's not get hung up on definitions, then you can kindly leave quietly by the back entrance, which, for all we know, is the front entrance, right? Let's not get hung up with definitions, right? A novel has a meaning. It is a fictional story that you create. And the reason why you have the gall to put it between hardcovers and sell it for money is because you allege to have some talent at doing that, more talent at creating that story than, for instance, your customers do. Otherwise, they would just write their own. It is not a memoir. No one cares about you. So if you were to label this a memoir, it wouldn't sell. It comes out in November. I will read it. In fact, since I've got a finished copy and the advanced copy's been sitting on the shelf for a while, I'll probably read it today. But that doesn't mean that I will agree that up is down and down is up. That is, I know that is pretty much essentially the demand that the 21st century is making on all of us just in general. Just in general. It's making a demand that, well, you know what the 2020 election was like. That's why we're beefing up election integrity efforts, because of the 2020 election, right? Am I right? No, you're not right. No, you're not right. There's no evidence to support what you're saying. It has no existence in objective reality. It is just an alternate reality you have created, and so on down the line. So, here you go. Here's Ali Rowbottom's new novel. It's not a novel. By her own admission, it's not a novel. And you wouldn't need her to be involved. You could, I'm sure, if you trolled social media long enough on Facebook, among the feeds of her friends, you would find every detail of this book. as we have found hundreds of such books in the course of even 2022 alone. But you are being asked in the 21st century to believe what your eyes see is not true. This became a very ranty mail alternate. Let's do this last one, and then we'll wrap up. Actually, this wasn't ranty. There were no rants in this mail haul. None at all. And I'm sorry that it went long, but it actually didn't go long. This is a 7-minute video. This is a 7-minute video. How about if I throw in some F-bombs? This is an effing 7-minute effing video. Anyway, let's just wrap this up. This also comes out in November. So these all three are hardcover November releases. Only this one, I'm greatly looking forward to. This one is. We'll end with a breath of fresh air. This is a big new biography of Shirley Hazard. This is the finished copy from Farrar, Strausser, Giroux. Big fat thing, very nice, very nice, and nice to end the year with a couple of really big fat biographies. There are a couple of not only big fat biographies, but big fat writer biographies, and not only that, but women writers. It's just wonderful, wonderful news. So Shirley Hazard, of course, higher profile than the author of Over the River and Through the Wood. But so I think we saw the advanced copy of this. This is now the finished copy. This is let's see here. In this book, Brigitte Olubas, an Australian scholar of Hazard's life and work and editor of Hazard's collected stories, traces her peripatetic life from her childhood in Sydney through her formative experience in Hong Kong and New Zealand, her time working for the United Nations as a young woman in Manhattan, and her decades-long career as a writer, as she traveled between and drew inspiration from New York and Italy. The author has captured Hazard in all her facets: her erudition and charm, her lifelong love of literature, her complex relationship with her family and her birth country, her marriage and deep partnership with the writer Francis Steegmuller, and of course, her astounding literary output, from the gem-like early stories to her classic final two novels, The Transit of Venus and The Great Fire. This is the first full biographical treatment of Hazard, a revealing and remarkable story of one of the 20th century's most beloved and singular writers. Great. Well, now I have the finished copy, so I can go at this pencil in hand. Fantastic. All right. Well, so that was the mail. That's plenty of ranting and plenty of periodicals. So we have the finished copy of a new biography of Shirley Hazard. Comes out in mid-November. Aesthetica, a new memoir by Ali Rowbottom, also in November. And Sunday Best by John Carey, a collection of his book reviews over the course of 50 years, also in November. So 3 November finished copies, plus the Epoch Times, and a couple of other far less delusional periodicals. So there you have it. There is some Saturday Mail, otherwise known as a full-length demonstration of the new entry-level Kindle from Amazon. I hope you enjoyed it. Anyway, I will wrap this up. I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.